All right, what's up, guys? James here. This is chapter 6, and we're talking about motivation theory. So the big idea today is when we look at performance, really on any task, there are 3 components. That is the ability the person has, the support that we as managers give them, things like training, tools, equipment, stuff like that. And the third one is motivation. So you can have lots of ability, no motivation, bad performance, or a highly motivated bonehead. That's not going to work out very well either. So we try to maximize ability when we hire people, support when we manage them, and motivation by understanding them and how we manage them. So it's a lot of different kind of explanations about why people do certain things. That is sort of the history. This is in negotiation. This is in trade. This is in family dynamics, right? This is across the board, broad psychology. Why do people do certain things? If we can understand why they do things, then we can predict what they're going to do. And with that, we can manage or control or manipulate, or whatever words you want to use, the individual based on rewards, punishments, right? Stuff like that, positive, negative reinforcements. Some of the early work on this, scientific work anyway, was after the Hawthorne studies, was B.F. Skinner. So you maybe have heard the term Skinnerian psychology. If it's the pigeon in the box, right, or the chicken, the pecking at little buttons, whatever it is, stimulus response is the idea. We've come a long way since then, as you'll see here in a minute. So big ideas of what we need to know. I'll throw out basically a few things that pretty much everyone agrees on motivation, and then we're going to go through a whole bunch of theories. And there are different types of theories, but it's basically this is one way to see it. And we'll look at another theory and say, here's another way to see it. Reality is all of them are probably true in different contexts, right? So remember, we have person, behavior, and context or environment. In different environments, different theories are going to have more validity. So motivation usually has a need and a drive and an incentive. So a need could be physiological, like you're hungry, psychological, like you want friends, whatever it is. There's some kind of need, and then we operate on our environment in order to satisfy that need. The degree to which we operate in terms of its strength or its direction will depend on how bad we want that incentive or how bad we want that need met. So if you are, normally you may not steal, but if you're starving and you think you're going to die, then you might steal food, for instance. So if I'm slightly hungry, I'm probably not going to steal anything. If I'm starving, I might at that point. Actually, I probably would. All right, different categories of motives. That's like this is stuff that, again, everybody agrees on, kind of the bottom line stuff: hunger, thirst, sex, and sleep. Like, we are motivated, all humans at all times, for the most part, are motivated for those things. Now, remember, we can give up those things. Maybe you're doing a fast or a cleanse or something like that. We can give up those things, but we'll ultimately be driven toward them. Those are primary motives. The next step is general motives. These are more psychological in nature. People are curious, or we learn to emotionally control people with silence or with anger or with words, whatever it is. The desire for intimacy, just to connect with another human, for affection, stuff like that. It's psychological, so we call those general motives because, again, they're pretty much universally true. The last one is secondary motives. These have to be learned, and they're psychological. So they're not, the first set of motives is just physiological. The next set, you don't have to learn to be curious. You just are curious, right? You don't have to learn to enjoy a hug. You just will. These ones have to be learned over time, right? Through operating on your environment. Much more psychologically based. This is a lot what we're going to focus on with organizational behavior. The use of power, for instance. You learn how to use power. Power is not good or bad, right? It's just influence. But we learn how to use that through experimentation throughout our lives, certainly in the early years. There's also there's need for power. There's also need for achievement. Some people, they're wired that way. They are moderate risk takers, high need for immediate feedback. You can see it. They're very much focused on a task. You might be a person who uses a checklist, right? I use a checklist. Sometimes when I do things, I forget to write them down. I'll write them down on my checklist and then I'll check the box. It's just like, this is very satisfying. That's a profile of someone with a higher need for achievement. Some other needs, need for affiliation or security or status, whatever it is. If we can understand in the organizational environment what needs our people, our workers, our human capital have, we're much more likely to be able to satisfy those needs when we want to, right? To reinforce the right behaviors. Those are things that pretty much everyone agrees on. Let's jump into some motivation theories now. They're really broken up into two different types of theories. There's a process theory, explains how things happen, and there's a content theory that explains what is actually motivating. The content theories are probably the simplest. If you've ever heard of Abraham Maslow, a horrible experiment, but it was what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, it made sense to people. It had face validity. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basically just says, look, the first thing you want is, some physical, like some food or maybe some safety, and you work your way all the way up to self-actualization. And the idea is the principle of satiation. Once a given need is met, once I have food, then I want a girlfriend. Once I have a girlfriend, then I want fill in the blank, a better career, whatever it is. But I'm not worried about my better career if I'm starving. So the idea is you kind of work your way up the pyramid. Most simple, basic form of content theory. This guy Herzberg switched that into a two-factor theory, where there was hygiene factors and motivators. His argument was motivators motivate people to do things. Hygiene factors like a salary, they only serve to demotivate if they're not there. Salary is not going to motivate you, but if you're not getting paid, you're going to be demotivated. So he had two factors. Kind of got criticized. It was pretty simple. And this dude Alder comes along and comes up with, I remember this by, I just, instead of saying Alderg for ERG, existence, relatedness, and growth. The idea is that these are core needs, and they sort of follow this order. Existence is just survival. Relatedness is connections with other people. And then growth is kind of that self-actualization, career status, stuff like that. An argument here is if somebody has their existence needs met, and yeah, they may have some growth in their personal life, but they're not connected to people. We get this a lot post-COVID, not connected to other people, loneliness, then they're going to be suffering. So ultimately, all three are kind of optimal. But once your existence and relatedness needs are met, then we focus more on growth. So you can see, I mean, it sounds like, why are we talking about this? Imagine this for an employee, right? Their existence needs are like their paycheck and a safe work environment. Once that's met, we want to put them in a group or a team or an environment where they can actually build relationships at work. Usually people don't leave jobs as much as people leave people. So we want them to connect at work. And at that point, then we can go to work on growth. They got a decent salary. They're not living on the streets. They got a couple friends at work. Sweet. Now we can focus on performance improvement. Okay. Those are a couple of content theories. Let's jump into process theories. These are a little bit more complex. These are psychologists who spent way too much time reading psychology books and coming up with ideas. Some of them are really cool and useful, like goal-setting theory. Others are big and complex, like Porter Lawler. But we'll jump into it. This guy Vic Vroom's got one of the most popular theories. It's pretty good. It's called expectancy theory. And it says that everybody's got a combination of three things, right? And these are the things that we need to think about more scientifically when we're managing. That is valence, instrumentality, and expectancy. It goes like this. Valence is just the value of something. Like, how much do you want something? If I say, okay, whoever can do the most push-ups in this class gets a piece of gum. You'd be like, that's not even worth doing a push-up. Okay, whoever can do the most push-ups in class gets $1 million. I bet a few more people are going to try at that point. So valence is all about, if you understand this, it's all about setting the right incentives, right? The right incentives have to be in place. It's more than just money, right? Money, feedback, recognition, prizes, benefits, like status, whatever it is, promotion. Setting a goal out there with incentives that are actually desirable, okay? The next one is instrumentality. This is where we're going to really focus on our employee self-efficacy. That is, I need you, students, to want to get an A in the class, or at least do well in the class, pass it if you're going to work hard. That's valence, straightforward. I also want you to believe that the first level outcome, right, your performance on exams, will lead to a second level outcome, which is the A in the class. So I want you to know that, yeah, you work hard, that's expectancy. If you do well, you'll actually get what you want. Think about an environment where you have employees who the manager's like, I want them to work hard, and the employees are like, I don't trust you're going to give me a raise. I don't trust anything's going to be different. Why would I work hard, do well here if I don't believe you're going to give me anything for it, right? So even if the valence, the value, the incentive is really good, but I go, yeah, but I don't trust that I'm going to get it once I do the work. So that's where we're enhancing trust. The last one is expectancy. This is the one where we go to work on self-efficacy. I want you to believe, A, yes, you want to get a good grade in the class. B, yes, I will actually give you a good grade in the class if you do the work. And C, that if you work hard, you can actually get it, right? This is a lot of what the one-on-one, the line supervisors, managers, this is your job. Your job is to convince people that if they put in the effort, they put in the time, that they'll actually have a good outcome. Positive reinforcement on this, it's called social persuasion, is very important. When somebody does something well, you point it out quickly. Look what you just did. You just put in the work, and then there was a great outcome. We're just trying to enhance their expectancy at that point to enhance overall motivation. So that's expectancy theory. The Porter-Lawler model, don't worry about this too much. I'll show you why. This is this is what it looks like. This is I'll tell you, the reason why I sort of like this model is because the content models, and to some extent even expectancy theory, simplifies human behavior quite a bit. Okay, so I'm here making a video, right, about motivation. I'm motivated to do well. I want to teach well. I want you to like it. I want you to learn. Yes, of course. But my son is out in our field running irrigation, and if he runs in here and says, Dad, there's a blowout in the irrigation pipe, I'm going to stop the video, and I'm going to fix that. So my motivation can switch in a second. This model sort of accounts for those things. It's more complex than meets the eye. But the big thing, I guess, to take away from the Porter-Lawler model is the idea, if you see 6, 7, 8, 9 there, satisfaction actually comes after performance. That was one of their big, like the aha things. It's not that you get people satisfied and they'll be good workers, actually the other way around, right? If they do good on something and they actually care about it, there's the intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, then they're satisfied with it. If you work hard, put forth the effort, and you do well on an exam and you get an A and you care about that A, you're going to be more satisfied with the class. There's a simple example. Okay, equity theory. Equity theory's been around for a while. There's a lot of talk today about social justice. There's actually 5 or 6 different types of justice: procedural justice, distributive justice, stuff like that. All of the different types of justices came from this theory, equity theory. And he says, Adam says, it's basically about inputs and outputs, meaning am I getting out what it is that I'm putting in? Let me give you an example. You work really hard in a class, you get an A. You work really hard, you get a promotion and a pay raise. All right, sweet. You're getting out of it the work that you're putting in. But if you bust your butt in a class, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, you're still getting D's and F's on assignments, you will do you'll do a couple things, but one of them is you'll probably be demotivated and you'll withdraw effort. You're saying, I'm not getting out of this what I'm putting in, so I'm going to put in less because I believe I'm going to get less, for instance. There's a few other things you can do, but equity theory is all about balancing inputs and outputs, and that has to do with your social comparison too. That's the second one, distorting the inputs. So if you get hired on a job and you're making $70,000 a year and you look over the person next to you is making $90,000 a year and you're doing better than they are, you're like, well, that's not fair. I should get a raise. But you might stand back and say, well, wait a minute. They've been here for 25 years, okay, and it's the owner's daughter or like whatever it is. You'll somehow rationalize, here's why it's different in this circumstance. If you don't do that rationalization, you're likely to be bitter and withdraw your work. Goal setting theory. This is like This is the best. This is great. This was voted #1 most useful most useful theory in all of organizational behavior. So if you've ever heard of like SMART goals, specific, measurable, etc., that all came from this theory. Locke and Latham way back in the day. It's a motivation theory. There's a ton of support for it. The big idea is if you have specific goals and they're relatively challenging and you can get agreement on those goals, then those goals are likely to be accomplished. So specificity, challenge, and then try to get agreement. How do we get agreement on goals? Well, usually get agreement on goals by giving people input into the process. So this is called management by objectives, MBO, familiar with that term. So the idea is you sit down with an employee, you talk about goals for the year. You know you want them specific, you know you want them challenging, in line with organizational strategy. And you work with them and say, okay, this is what's in my head to be a good kind of goal to work on for the next 6 months, 3 months, year, whatever it is. What do you think? Like, is this reasonable? Does it fit with what you, if you give people input into things, then they're more likely to have ownership over it and agree with you. Those are 3 things on goal setting theory. With that, we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about the last one, which is the job characteristics model.
Around 1969, 1971, these guys came up with the job characteristics model, Hackman and Oldham. You don't have to worry about those researchers. A couple of smart people, and they said, hey, look, this model is really important. So I'm going to explain the model here and then kind of dissect it in a couple slides, and then we'll revisit it. So hopefully bring it all together and synthesize it. So here is the voted the #2 most useful theory in management over 100 years. So this is still referred to often. It's taught in every textbook, and there's a reason for it. This one actually has both internal validity and external validity. It goes like this. Every job has it falls somewhere on a continuum with these 5 characteristics: skill, variety, task identity, significance, autonomy, and feedback. So everything you see there on the left. Every job has those. It's not like if I have the most boring, mundane job in the world, there is skill variety. It's just very low. And if I am a neurosurgeon, where I have to meet with families and then evaluate charts and actually perform surgery and do follow-up and post-op, I have to do all that, their skill variety is just very high. So in that way, every job falls somewhere on a continuum with these 5 characteristics. The theory moves on. It says, the way the job is designed here on those 5 things actually predicts how people feel about their job. So if I have a job with very low skill variety, low task identity, and low task significance, meaning I don't have to use my brain in this job, I do a really small piece of the work, and it doesn't affect anyone and nobody gives a crap about this job, then probably you're not going to feel like what you do is very meaningful. So that's the psychological state, or in this case called the mediator, those circles in the middle. So each of the job characteristics on the left lead to each of those psychological states in the middle. Now, if those psychological states are high, meaning my job is meaningful, I feel responsible for my job, and I have feedback on my job, so a knowledge of results so I can change my performance, then a few things are going to happen. Number 1, I'll be more motivated. Number 2, I'll be more satisfied. Number 3, I'll actually be better at my job. So, big picture, those things on the left affect those things in the middle, affect the ultimate outcomes of satisfaction and performance. So let's unpack them. Skill variety. If you have a job that has high skill variety, the work would require several activities for successful completion. It's not Henry Ford assembly line. I put that spoke on that wheel, and that's what I do for 15 hours a day, for 6 days a week. Now that would be very low task identity. High task identity, I have to use I think of like a welder. It might be kind of a weird example, but a welder has to consider the chemical processes, the type of metal they're working with, the temperature, the type of weld they're bringing to it. Then they have to actually engage their body to do the welding. Then they have to switch over to the end, the custom work on making it all pretty. So it requires a lot of different skills, meaning the work is probably more meaningful. Task identity, do you get to do the whole thing? Were you like one of the first couple of engineers who built the vehicle? It was 2 guys that built the first car. They did everything. Now, of course, we have assembly lines. But when you get to do the whole thing, you feel like it's much more meaningful. So if I'm going to build a house from scratch, there's dirt there and there's a functioning house there when it's done, it's very meaningful to me, right? If I'm just a person that comes in and installs the insulation in 30 houses, whatever, that quarter, it's not so meaningful to me so much because I didn't get to do the whole thing, right? Last one is task significance. Does it affect people? Does anybody actually know? Is anybody aware that it's even happening? To the extent that goes up, that's pretty cool. Task significance to me, to some extent, there's also like this public component. It's like, mom, dad, this is my fiance, the garbage man, or mom, dad, this is my fiance, the CEO of a multinational, not-for-profit that digs wells for people. Okay, one of those is really cool, and one of those is like, all right. So I call it the fiance test on task significance. Does it impact people, and do people think it's cool? So with these right here, if skill variety is high, I have to use a lot of skills to do the job. I get to do the whole job, and the job actually matters. So think about your job right now that you have, if you have a job. Do you have to use a lot of different skills? Does anybody care what you do? Like, is it cool? Does it have an impact on people? And do you get to do one little slice of the pie, or do you get to do kind of the whole thing? If those are high, chances are you're like, yeah, this is a meaningful job. It actually matters. The next two, autonomy. Back in the 1980s, they stopped using the word autonomy. They began to use the word empowerment. Right? So there's a whole literature on empowerment, but it's very similar. Do you have self-determination? Do you get to decide how things get done and then implement that? So we might say that someone working in an assembly line or in fast food probably doesn't have a lot of autonomy. They can't look at a Big Mac and go, you know what? Man, I'm putting 5 pickles on this one. I'm going to put in 3 patties. Hey, let's go with a sourdough bun this time. We're just going to switch it up a bit. No, we're not going to have people do that who are making Big Macs. If someone is an architect, they may go, hey, or an artist, I guess would be the perfect example. You go, you can create this sculpture or this painting or this whatever it is, however you want. You get to decide, and you are responsible for the results. So when it's on you, you get to decide. Let me jump back here. You tend to feel responsible for it. Why? Because there's nobody else to blame. There's nobody else to take credit, and there's nobody else to say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault, because you were the one that got to decide it. Of all of them, autonomy, in my view, is probably the most powerful. The more autonomy or empowerment you can give to employees, they feel responsible for their work. They're probably going to love their work a lot more. Now, here's the problem. Take a look at the word empower. It means you're giving, as a manager, you're actually giving your power away. You're giving your decision-making authority away. So you can't go out and empowering every bonehead on your shop floor, right? Like, you can only do this in certain situations. You can see the complexity. If I empower some people and not others, there may be a sense of injustice. But where you can, autonomy is a beautiful, very impactful thing on employees. The last one is feedback. Do you know quickly and accurately how well you did on your job? So when I write a paper to publish and I submit it to an editor and I hear back in 6 months whether they accepted it or want me to create a revision, that's like feedback. That tells me how good was that paper. My peers are going to go decide, blind peer review, and they're going to tell me, they're going to affirm, yes, Avey, you did a good job. This is a good paper. So I have feedback, which means the next paper that I'm writing, I'm going to do that same thing again. Or if they say, no, James, there was grammar mistakes all over the paper, and you used the wrong theory for your hypotheses. Well, as soon as I have that feedback, that means I can correct my performance on the next behavior. Another example is a waiter at a restaurant. I used to work at Red Robin when I was in college. And you'd find out pretty quick what jokes people liked. You'd find out pretty quick how to interact with families, right? The cheap crowd that wanted the free fries and the free refills, if you stay on it quick, right? And the folks who came in and they just wanted to drink hard alcohol, you had a pretty good idea how that was going to go. And so how would I know if I was doing a good job? Tips. In 25, 35 minutes, I have a real empirical number right there. This is how well you did with that table. If it went well, I would employ the same strategy next time. If it didn't go well, I would stop funny jokes about cooks in the kitchen and leave it alone. So you can basically modify your performance with the feedback you get on your job. Some jobs you get lots of feedback, right? And in this job, in terms of teaching, people usually think the feedback is like teacher evaluations at the end. It's not for me. Feedback for me is in 3 years when someone calls and says, hey, this happened, I remembered this, and I did the right thing. Or, Avey, I remember you talking about something on this topic, salary negotiations. I just got this job offer. What do I do? To me, that's feedback. It's like, okay, that made a dent. When I told that story, people actually remembered it. So, in sum, where are we here? Each of those 5 things contribute to each of those 3 psychological states. We want them all higher as much as we can. There are certain jobs you can't give autonomy, right? There's certain jobs that they're just low feedback by nature, right? If you're firing off a satellite to Pluto and those pictures don't come back for a year, you're not going to know if you did the calculus right for about a year. There's nothing you can do about it. But on our end, on a manager end, as much as we can design jobs to enhance these 5 things, it'll go better for us, go better for our employees. Now, here's the question. What do we do about it? So far, I've used this as a descriptive model, meaning it describes how job design impacts performance and attitudes, right? So let's switch it from a descriptive model, describing it, to a prescriptive model. Let's look at what is the prescription. If this theory is useful, there should be a prescription. In other words, it should tell managers what to actually do. So there's basically 3 main prescriptions from this particular theory. Again, the concept that we're looking at is how do we design a job or change a job, redesign a job to increase these 5 things so we get the benefit of that as managers, also as employees, and as the organization as a whole. So 3 ways we do that are job enlargement, job enrichment, and job rotation. I got a lot of stories on this, but it'll take way too long. But something as simple as job rotation, that's shifting someone around from position to position. There's certain areas you can do that. You can't shift me to go be an accounting professor. It's not going to work. It would be a disaster, right? But there's certain areas you can. I did some work in a meat processing factory, which is kind of a crazy place. But something as simple as job rotation made a big deal. So where you would do this is when there's a very defined statement of work. Think assembly line, or in our case, like meat processing. Think fast food. The fry girl can go be the burger girl, can go be the cashier girl, can go be, I mean, whatever. You get the idea. That they're defined statements of work, and we can rotate people. You don't, if you work at McDonald's, you're not the fry guy for 52 weeks a year. We rotate people around, and what that does is enhances skill variety. Means they have to learn different things, use their brain, do different things. Enhances maybe a little bit of task identity, meaning I get to see at least a lot more of the whole job. And maybe when the fry guy finally gets to work the drive-through window, maybe his task significance, they go, man, it was pretty cool, like giving people their meal. If that's cool, I guess, giving people fries from McDonald's. But that would be a little bit of task significance. You're probably not going to affect autonomy or feedback with job rotation alone. So that's the simple one. It does matter. I've seen it change both turnover and performance.